Welcome back. Kat here with the power of you. So what I was shown was I spent most of my time watching withdrawal videos, mostly people tapering benzos, because I knew that was, in spite of everything I was going through, I still knew that the benzo was probably going to be the worst. The Risperdal tapering that I had done was its own special kind of hell. But the benzo, when I cut that quarter, that 0.25 back before the other sensible slow tapering, it was its own special kind of hell and torture. So I watched a lot of people tapering benzos on YouTube and other medications that they were tapering, and looking to see, is anybody else tapering risperidone? Has anybody else tapered Trileptal and recorded it? Can I bounce back from this? Are other people actually getting off this stuff? And so that, YouTube, that consumed a lot of my time. It really did. Then the next morning, when I was making my juice, pulled up the YouTube to listen to, there was a video in my feed about the mind-body connection and how powerful our mind is. And I thought, that's kind of unique. I don't know that I ever heard that. So clicked on it and listened to it. And it was Marissa Peer. And she was talking about how when we think certain thoughts, they have a physical manifestation in our body. And I thought, I never really paid attention to what I was thinking when I was having these feelings, especially anxiety and panic, and like what was I thinking at the time and what was I focusing on? And I thought, this might actually be something. And so I watched more of her videos and really enjoyed her content. It made sense to me. It resonated with me. And I thought, I need to really start paying attention to what I'm thinking about, because if this is correct, it's contributing to my anxiety and my depression and my fear and my panic and my disempowerment and all of these things. And I thought, okay. So I started paying attention, and lo and behold, the things I was thinking about, the words I was speaking, the way I was describing my life and my situation, and to other people and family, and the clerks that I knew by name at the health food store, I started to realize that I was telling a very specific story, and that if I'm thinking these things and feeling these things and telling this story, that it's not helpful at all. In fact, it was very hurtful to me. So that was my first step. Then the universe brought me law of attraction videos in the form of Abraham Hicks, which in the beginning was very strange. And so I didn't listen to a lot of their work, but other things were brought in. So I started listening to audiobooks like The Magic of Believing, and other law of attraction content creators that did make more sense to me about not only the mind-body connection, but our thoughts, and what stories are we telling, and how these thoughts and stories that we tell are disempowering, and how much our mind does control our body and our physiological, what we're feeling in our bodies. And about 3 weeks into this, I got this kind of harebrained idea of, what if I could be hypnotized into not feeling these, the tapering withdrawal symptoms. And so I hopped online, and there was a really well-known, respected hypnotherapist in the state of Texas where I live, but he wasn't seeing clients anymore. Or I think it was, maybe he was just seeing clients that were already established with him. And I thought, oh, that's a bummer. Okay, well, I'll just keep looking for another hypnotherapist. And at this point, I'm starting to realize that a lot of my previous trauma is really getting triggered by this tapering process, right? This coming off process. A lot of my trauma from childhood and young adult and earlier in my, life and my first marriage and is really getting triggered like crazy. And I thought I definitely need something, to help also with processing the trauma, because if I come off this medication and I haven't dealt with the stuff that landed me here in the first place, right? Like, why am I abandoning myself all the time? And, things that when I would think about incidences as a kid, that still evoked, a very real visceral response in me, that if I didn't deal with this stuff, if I got off the medication, it's still going to be there. Like, the problems are still going to be there. And I don't know how they're going to show up. I don't know how they're going to manifest. But I want to be healthy on the other side of this. I had decided I want to be completely, totally healthy on the other side, mentally, emotionally, physically, spiritually. And so I was also looking for something regarding trauma. And I'd been in therapy for 25 years at this point, every week, at least once a week, inpatient, inpatient intensive therapy, outpatient intensive therapy, group therapy. So I had a lot of insight about why things were the way they were, how I got the way I got, so to speak, but no resolution. A lot of insight, but no resolution and no healing. So in my search, I came across something called Psych-K, all capitals, PSYCH-K. And I read on a random, which nothing is random, forum where someone was talking about how Psych-K really transformed their trauma. So I hopped online, or I was already online. I hopped on Google and I Googled for a Psych-K facilitator near me. And very, very close to me down the road was a Psych-K facilitator. And I went to her website and she offered different packages of hours. And I think the top package was 10 hours. And I think she called it a major overhaul. Like I think 3 hours or something was like a tune-up, and 5 hours was like a deep dive, and 10 hours was a major overhaul. And I'm like, that's me, major overhaul, signing up. So I just knew that it was right, that it was that it was what I was looking for. And I went to my first session as a client in the second week of January in 2018. So at this point, I'm holding on the Risperdal, no cutting there. I'm holding on the Trileptal. I have not resumed the 0.5 milligram of clonazepam. And what else was I taking? Those were the 3 main ones that were left: the Trileptal, the remaining clonazepam, and the remaining risperidone. So I went for my first session, and as I'm driving down the tollway, I'm white knuckling it. I'm in the far right lane. I'm praying to God nobody cuts me off, not because I'm going to be angry, but I'm afraid about my reaction and going into a panic attack. Can I react fast enough? And if I do, is it going to send me into a panic attack? Because at this point, my central nervous system was just blown up. Like the slightest little anything just totally shook me. And so I'm driving myself down a 6-lane tollway in the Dallas Metroplex to get to this appointment. Yes, down the road, but I took the fast route. Probably should have not gone on the highway, but I was anxious and wanted to get there. So took the tollway to get there and had my first session. And when I left, I felt so much better physically. I drove home in the middle lane. I was going, the speed limit, keeping up pretty much with the traffic in the 3rd lane. Whereas on the way there, I was white knuckling it and going the minimum speed I could go and still be on the tollway. And then just hoping I could get myself there in one piece. So I get in my car and I sit there and I'm like, I feel so much better physically. Like it felt as if it was really, really close to feeling like I wasn't tapering anything at all. Like that I wasn't holding on anything, that I was just a normal, stable, healthy individual. And I was like, whoa. So beyond that though, I didn't think anything as like, but what does this mean? Like, did anything change? Like, I don't know what this means. And so that night at dinner, I was crying at the kitchen table and I said, I feel better physically, but what happens when I start cutting the medication again? And I think this is all fake. I think it's all like fake woo-woo, weird stuff, right? And I'm like crying to my husband again. And he's like, well, you don't have to go back. And then he said, but just wait a couple days and see how things, see what happens. And over the next couple of days, I started to notice incredible changes in my life and in my reality. It wasn't so much about the medication or the tapering or how I felt physically. It was more about my thoughts and how I saw myself and how I saw the world and how I saw the experience of going through the medication tapering and the experience of being prescribed the medication, because I was so angry at the, psychiatrist who initially prescribed it. I was, angry at my mother for teaching me that when the doctor gives you medication, you take it. You don't, that's what you're there for. That's why you go to the doctor. And the anger around myself for why didn't I research this? Why did I put this stuff in my mouth? Right? Like, especially the benzo and the risperidone. Like, why did I put this in my mouth? Why did I start taking this stuff? Why didn't I listen to myself? Why didn't I listen to all of that was gone. And the pieces, and when I did think about those things, I had a completely different perspective. It's my whole perspective shifted on it. And I saw it from a completely different place. So it got to the point where I realized, you know what? I welcomed that medication because it was a relief. It brought me relief. Yes, it numbed me out, but I needed to be numbed out. And in thinking about it, the state of my marriage at the time, taking the medication probably saved my marriage. It probably saved my life. It allowed me to continue on my career, which was very important to me at that time. And I welcomed the feeling of being numb. Whether or not I thought it was making me happy from being depressed. It's irrelevant. I recognized that I welcomed the numbing out. It was a reprieve. It was a welcomed reprieve. I welcomed the benzodiazepine because it allowed me to sleep. I was grateful to be able to sleep all night, get up, go to work, live my life, do the things that were important to me because I was well rested and I could sleep. I never took it it wasn't prescribed, and I never had anxiety or panic attacks or anything. It was just for sleep, just for sleep. And, I just had completely different perspective of, I did the best I could with where I was at the time. And I can't beat myself up for it, right? Like, we're all just doing the best we can, which was a completely different perspective than what I had prior to this Psyche session. And so I knew that I was really on to something. So I went back to my next session, and at that next session, I did 1 or 2 balances, might have only been 1, but that 1 balance. So I now facilitate this process, and a balance process usually takes between 2 to 5 minutes. I balanced for 1 goal, and it took over an hour. It was like an hour and 27 minutes or something like that, with the purpose of healing from an eating disorder that I had had for many, 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 like elementary school years. And I had 1 goal statement. It took me an hour and 27 minutes to balance for it. And I never had a problem with an eating disorder again after that day. Ever again. Backing up to my first appointment, I was in a couple of 12-step groups. One was for an eating disorder, and the other one was for codependency, that whole self-abandonment piece. And I went back to my meeting, my 12-step meeting, the next day after that first balance session, and I felt like a square peg in a round hole. It's not that I didn't understand. It's not that I didn't get it, but I just could not relate to what was happening in that 12-step meeting. It seemed like I was a completely different person. It didn't, while I understood it, it seemed totally not applicable to me, totally not relevant. Like, why am I here? And I thought it was a fluky thing. I went to this meeting like every day at noon, every day at noon. And I went back the next day thinking maybe it's just a fluky thing. Maybe I'm just having an off day again. And in that second attempt, that second meeting after my first balance session, I knew I did not belong there ever, ever again. So that's what got me on my path to healing and recovery. And I so I'll go into my story more in the next section, but basically I used a combination of the law of attraction and other universal laws, Psyche, and conscious creation, consciously creating my reality and the experience that I wanted to have. And I'll go into that more in my next video.